You ordered your Sony FX2, but you're not quite sure what memory card you need for those high 4K 10-bit 422 video files. Let's take a look at what memory cards are the best for your camera. Welcome to the channel where I help you learn to make good videos. And after using and testing my memory cards in the FX2, as well as referencing the manual, I'm going to show you which various memory cards at multiple price points will work with the FX2 based on which filming modes that you want to use. And all the cards I'm talking about are linked in the description, so if you decide to purchase through any of those, it won't cost you anything extra, but it will greatly help out the channel. And if I learn about any compatibility issues with any memory cards and this camera later on, I'll post that in the description, so be sure to check that for updates. This camera has dual memory card slots that are both compatible with SD cards. However, only one is compatible with the CFexpress Type A card. So keep in mind that you'll need to have two of the memory cards that are suggested if you want to be able to record a backup of your footage while filming. And looking at the manual for the FX2, the highest listed recording bitrate is 616 megabits per second when shooting in the XAVC SI 4K mode at 60 frames per second with proxy recording on. When it comes to choosing a fast enough memory card for your camera, it's really important that you understand the difference between megabits and megabytes. Let old me explain. 8 bits equals 1 byte, and therefore 8 megabits equals 1 megabyte. Megabits, little b, megabytes, big B. And it's important to know the difference here because when it comes to figuring out which card you need, camera manufacturers typically list the video recording speeds in megabits per second. So when you see a write speed up to 600 megabits per second on the Sony ZV-E10 Mark II, don't freak out thinking, I can't find a card that has a 600 on it, because that 600 megabits, little b, equates to 75 megabytes, big B. So looking back at the manual, when you divide by 8, that highest bitrate of 616 megabits per second equates to 77 megabytes per second. And the memory card needs to have a minimum sustained write speed that is higher than the maximum recording bitrate of the camera so that you won't have any drop frames or errors in your videos. The V90 on this memory card means the minimum sustained write speed is at least 90 megabytes per second, which is higher than the FX2's max recording bitrate of 77 megabytes per second. So you know that you're good with this card. However, when we look at the card compatibility in the manual of the FX2, it shows that when you're recording with proxy files on, that the V90 SD cards, although fast enough, won't actually work. I'm not sure if it's because of the way the camera has to record multiple files, but you'll have to use a CFexpress Type A card if you want to shoot in this mode with proxy files on. Also, if you shoot in the fixed variable mode, you'll have to use the CFexpress Type A card at the highest bit rates regardless if you're recording proxy files. But if you choose to shoot without proxy files in the standard mode, FX2's bitrate is 600 megabits per second or 75 megabytes per second, which is below the V90 speed of this SD card, meaning that the SD card will work fine in this mode. And keep in mind that these high bit rates of 600 megabits per second are based on shooting in this intra-frame mode of XAVC SI at 4K 60 frames per second, whereas you'll only be at 240 megabits per second when shooting at the same mode in 4K at 24 frames per second. If you shoot in the group of pictures mode of XAVC S, those bit rates will be much lower at 100 megabits per second at 4K 24 frames per second and 200 megabits per second at 60 frames per second. I typically shoot in the XAVC S mode for YouTube videos and only move to those higher SI mode bit rates to get the better quality intra-frame recording when shooting a small film or like for the feature film I'm working on right now. And if you don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to intra-frame versus the long group of pictures recording mode, I have another video that is linked in the description that explains how those work and how they affect the quality of your videos. So basically, the CFexpress Type A card will allow you to shoot in all the video modes that the camera has to offer, and the V90 SD card will allow you to shoot in every standard mode the camera has with the proxy files off. So now, let's look at what size capacity memory cards you'll need. Based on the bit rates listed for the FX2, a 256 gigabyte V90 SD card will give you 50 minutes of 4K at 60 frames per second in the SI mode and 2 hours and 16 minutes of 4K at 24 frames per second. And you'll get half those times if you decide to go with a 128 gigabyte card. However, if you want to be able to shoot in all those variable rate modes with proxy files on or off, then you'll need the CFexpress Type A card, which right now has capacity options available from 80 all the way up to 1920 gigabytes. They're much more expensive than SD cards, but that's because they're giving you up to 400 megabytes per second of sustained write speeds. So this 160 gigabyte CFexpress Type A card will give you 25 minutes of 4K at 60 frames per second in the SI mode and 70 minutes of 4K at 24 frames per second, and you'll get double those times if you go with a 320 gigabyte card. Obviously the Sony cards will work perfectly fine in the FX2 since it is a Sony camera, but when it comes to the SD card, I've used Lexar cards for years as well as SanDisk with no issues. I've also seen Philip Bloom say he uses Pro grade cards and doesn't have any problem with those. But if you do get a card that doesn't work, please post it down in the comments so that I can help make others aware. So to sum it up with all that in mind, I'd suggest this 256 gigabyte UHS-II V90 SD card to be able to shoot in any normal video mode with proxy recording set to off, or this 160 gigabyte CFexpress Type A card to be able to shoot in any possible mode the camera has to offer. And again, be sure to get a second memory card if you want to be able to record a backup of your footage while you're filming. However, you'll have to be recording in one of those modes that can record to an SD card since there's only one CFexpress Type A slot. There's also a link to a CFexpress Type A card reader in the description so you'll be able to transfer footage to your computer, but you can always use the USB-C port to transfer straight from your camera to the computer. And again, it doesn't have to be these brands, but I'm just trying to find the best deals for you that I know work with the FX2. And I wouldn't be surprised if you have any questions after all that, so post them down in the comments and I'll try to clarify anything I can. But if this video is helpful to you, please help me out by hitting that like button, subscribe for more content because I have lots of things on like framing, lighting, filming techniques that'll help you to learn to make better videos. And I'll see you soon.